Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. This is our second episode of our podcast. And to welcome it, we changed up the decor a little bit. We included some pumpkins. And let's discuss the seasons of change.
This is one of the biggest shifts coming from the Caribbean. And in this episode, we're going to share our stories and experiences, especially with winter, summer, and even more so how the seasons make an impact to people and culture and even their interactions. So for all my fellow Canadians watching this podcast, if you don't know, Trinidad only has 2 seasons. So we have the dry season and we have the rainy season.
Now for our first question, we do have a lot of stories we have been living in for the last 5 years. And for our first question, what was your first winter experience like?
So being a Trini, we only ever experience sun or rain. Coming to Canada for the first time and experiencing winter, you will go through that phase where it feels like you're living in a dream. Seeing snow for the first time, we felt like, we're living in a movie, and just being outside, looking up at the sky and seeing it fall on you and playing in the snow, it just feels magical. And I think every Trini immigrant who comes to Canada has the same feeling that they can't believe it, and it's so pretty, the snow is so fluffy, and it just seems like a dream and something you see in like a Hallmark movie. But there is a period of time or phase, I think, that we all go through as Trini immigrants. After some time, unfortunately, that magic does seem to fade. Especially when, reality sets in. You have to go to work. And if you live in the suburbs like us and you have a car, exiting your home every day is a challenge in the winter because you have to shovel the snow. You have to clean your windscreen. You can't just leave snow on the ground. It's very difficult to drive. That magic will soon fade away when it's time to go to work, because it soon becomes almost like an annoyance. After a while, you actually would need to get up like almost an hour earlier to just shovel your driveway, shovel the snow off of your car before you can even leave home. And that just takes up a lot of time, and it's just annoying.
So for me, after we migrated is when I actually, the first time I experienced snow and saw snow for the first time. As Anthony mentioned, it was a magical experience. Before I migrated, I had, we used to look at movies and look at all these photos online about what snow is like, and it's also magical, as she mentioned. But the thing is, reality does set in, and we do have to clean our cars. Now, one thing that I thought is that we need to clean our cars every single day before we leave for work, but it's only when it snows. And that's something I realized, like, it's not every single day, but you do get news reports, and we are well in tune with the weather when there's a snowstorm. So a snowstorm, come to think of it, as like when it rains. So it doesn't rain every single day, but when it does rain, you have an annoyance. So it doesn't snow every single day during winter, but when it does, maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, you may go a couple of weeks without seeing snow. But when it does is when the temperature really plummets, it goes to minus, and then you have that annoying thing of cleaning your cars. When I moved to Canada, I didn't have the liberty of working from home and working hybrid and stuff. So for my first job, I remember a couple of years ago, there was a huge snowstorm that morning before I headed to work, and I was cleaning my car, and it was snowing so heavily that after I cleaned, within a couple of minutes, because of the rapid rate of snowfall, it was actually piling up, and I couldn't leave my driveway. If you imagine that, it's all magical and stuff when you see it, but if it's snowing so heavily, you can't leave your driveway. It hasn't been plowed, and it builds up, and you can't actually drive through it. It actually stopped snowing at 8:30 a.m. So it was snowing heavily, and I actually couldn't leave. And I called in to work, and I told them that I couldn't actually make it out of my driveway. And I wasn't the only one. That day had a major snowstorm, and only, I think, two persons showed up to work that day. So employers do understand when it's snowing very heavily, they can't make it to work. But unfortunately, because of my working situation, I wasn't able to get paid for that day. So that's something that to understand, is that sometimes if you don't make it to work, or if you not have the flexibility to work from home that day, you may be able to miss your pay. But if you, like with the company I'm with right now, I am able to work hybrid. So if there's a large snowstorm, which was earlier this year, there was a large snowstorm, and I wasn't able to make it to work, it's okay, I can work from home. But if your working arrangement does not allow it, then you won't be able to be paid.
All right, so let's talk about layering. So you always hear about these things. Oh, okay, you're living in a cold climate, so you must wear several layers of clothing. Let's face it, no one likes wearing layers of clothing and you're looking bulky and almost like the Michelin man. But it is almost a reality of life when you're living here in Canada. But I think what's important to understand is sometimes you don't need to have multiple layers on, because sometimes wearing too many layers might actually work in reverse. You might actually feel very, very hot. So it's about trying to understand your body and what works for you. Like in winter, investing in a good pair of winter boots, a good winter jacket, even like all the accessories, like the hats, the gloves, the scarves, that's very important. Insulated socks, very important. You don't need to have a lot of pieces, but that is a must. And understanding that clothing here in winter, it varies based on temperature. So when you're looking for a specific like winter jacket, you have to look at the temperature that it's rated for. And that was a huge departure from obviously being in Trinidad, where you never have to even like wear a jacket even. I think it was very rare if you ever see a Trini wearing like a jacket, maybe if you go to like the movies or something, or you're going on a plane. Like that was never a thing. So that took some time to try and understand as well. Let's say if you are taking public transportation, you might want to lay up a little bit more, because chances are you're going to be standing outside waiting for your bus a little bit longer.
It also depends on the weather in your area. So the area that we live in, the GTA, Mississauga, it doesn't get really, really cold in comparison to other parts of Canada now. Canada is known to be cold, so you have to know your area, look at the forecast, be updated with the weather, and something that we're really in tune to right now. It does vary. So sometimes it may be minus in the morning, and when the sun comes out, it may get hot. So you don't want to be caught with a lot of layers outside. So what we do during those times when we're heading out over the weekend, or even like during our daily commutes, we do have a spare jacket in the car, and maybe several different types of jackets, because sometimes you don't want to be outside and you have a heavy winter jacket preparing for minus and it's really, really cold, and then it gets hot on you and you feel uncomfortable. So that's something that we always mention, and we always want to recommend that we kind of built it into our culture, that we have a couple of pairs of jackets in the car. We have heating mitts, mittens, heating pads, all these different things in the car, just in case the temperature changes on us.
So for me, for my first job, I didn't have a car as yet, so I relied on public transportation. So I had to take the bus, versus like right now, I have my own car. And I can tell you from my personal experience, there's a vast difference in terms of battling the elements when you're outside waiting for public transportation versus when you have a car. After one of my work days, I was waiting for the bus and it was just pouring. It was just heavy snow. That's the one thing you need to remember. Like before you leave work, you have to make sure and put on all of your winter gear. So you go to work with all of your winter gear, and then you have to remove your winter gear because obviously you're going to feel hot, but then it takes time for you to put it all back on. So I remember having to take time to put on like my winter shoes and my winter jacket and my hats and my gloves. And then also like you have to be careful like when you're walking along the pedestrian pathways to make sure that you're not walking on slippery surfaces, because you can easily slip on ice here, because most times, we're always in a rush and you would see people like almost running towards a bus. In winter, you can't do that. Versus now that I have a car, a completely different approach. Now I don't have to like worry about putting on a lot of layers because I'm not going to be outdoors for a long period of time. There's a vast difference, because when you're driving for the first time in winter and in snow, you have to understand it's a different mode of driving. So the way you drive in summer, typically sometimes you would see like persons driving a little bit faster. In winter, it's the opposite. It takes twice as long to reach your destination, because a lot of times if the roads are not cleared of snow, your car can skid in the ice very easily. So you would find that whatever, you were accelerating before in summer, you almost like are going half or less than that. And then the biggest I think shock for us was, learning that in wintertime we actually have to have winter tires on our cars. So that's something like we didn't know before. In Canada, and generally when the temperature falls below 7 degrees Celsius, you're advised to change your tires to winter tires. And generally it has better traction, like driving on icy roads. And from personal experience, I can tell there is a big difference. Like if you don't have winter tires in winter, like you're gonna have problems driving on the roads, especially if it's very icy.
There's no carnival activities here. There's no fets. It's winter, right? So that's something that you need to pay attention to if you're accustomed to that in Trinidad and you move to Canada and you want to go to outdoor fet or try to experience this. You're looking on social media, you're seeing all your friends in all these different fets in Trinidad and stuff. It's going to be really tough for you. During these times too, people actually travel back to Trinidad to experience carnival. So last thing I wanted to discuss in terms of winter is seasonal depression. Because in Trinidad, you have one temperature, one humidity fairly enough throughout the entire year. But in Canada, when you're exposed to winter, those colder and darker months, because the sun sets around 4:30, it gets really dark like night. And then the sun rises maybe 9:30. So you are exposed to less sunlight and generally looks overcast and gloomy during those winter times. You're not getting the sun, you're not getting vitamin D. You have to take vitamins. So take your vitamins, take your vitamin D regularly, especially during those cold winter times, because if you want to read up more on seasonal depression, you're inside a lot of times, you're not being active, it's cold, your skin gets really dry, and does affect you mentally. So always seek help and have a support system, because sometimes you get depressed and sometimes you're not being able to be as active as you would during summer or even like fall or spring. You have a lot of indoor activity. You could have indoor recreational sports. You can be at home, go to the gym, yes, but always try to ensure that you get your vitamins in so you avoid seasonal depression. Now on to our next question. How different does summer feel compared to Trinidad?
So the heat in Trinidad is not the same thing as the heat in Canada, or at least in Ontario. The humidity is what makes the difference between the two countries. Obviously, Trinidad is very hot. It usually rotates between 32 to 34 degrees, but generally you're not feeling that almost stagnant heat because it is in the tropics. There's breeze. In Canada, or at least Ontario, it is different. The humidity is much higher and it is drier. So when you step outside in peak summer, you're faced with that stagnant heat. You feel sometimes that you're suffocating. So don't think that, oh, okay, well, it's summer now, I can, be as normal as I was in Trinidad. It's not the same thing. So one thing I've noticed living here in terms of summer, the clothing is different. What I would have imagined in our first summer here that, okay, I was excited to wear all my Trini clothes again because now I can finally wear it. Reality is that I can't wear it because it's so much hotter here. What I've noticed in terms of from a clothing perspective, when I look at persons in Trinidad versus at least here in Ontario, I remember being back in Trinidad, the typical or average person wears a lot of jeans and denim when we are out. Whether it is you're going to the grocery, you're going to the mall, you're going to the movies, like denim is a thing that typically we all wear. But in the summer, peak summer here in Canada, like it gets so hot where wearing like jeans or anything that's too tight, or thick, it can be like almost suffocating. So one thing I've noticed is that summer here, you would tend to see people wearing much more lighter clothes. They wear a lot of shorts just to be outside. And it's just such a different culture here because as Trinis, we would never just leave our house wearing shorts just to go out to do our everyday errands, but that is a way of life here. The other thing that's different here in the summer is something called patio season, and that is a big thing here. It is almost like the summer culture here, at least in Ontario. As soon as summer hits, a lot of restaurants, they open up their patios, which is their outdoor seating. Canada is pretty cold for the majority of the year, so once the sun comes out, outdoor dining opens up, and Canadians love their patio season. They love to be outdoors and they love to just be outside and be on the patios and just enjoy like a nice dinner or lunch or brunch. A lot of times, like if you're dining out at a lot of restaurants in Canada, In the summertime, they would ask you if you would like patio dining or inside. And to be honest, the patio seating is in so much demand that most times you may not ever get it unless you book it several weeks in advance. The biggest difference leaving Trinidad and coming to Canada is there's no such thing as beaches here. Beach, what is that? That doesn't even exist here. River lime? No, that's not even a thing here. So for my Trinis who love their maracas every weekend or making their river lime, that could be almost depressing to give up, leaving that comfort in Trinidad to come here to Canada. Like, that's not a thing. So Canada has lakes. So during the summertime, you do see a lot of Canadians. They make their lime, so to speak, at a lake. And, that's for them is their type of beach. But for us Trinis, that can just never be a beach. Bathing in a lake, that's not the same thing as maracas. It's not the same thing as a river lime. So it's just a different type of culture altogether. But a lot of Canadians look forward to that. They love to be by the lake in the summer. All right, moving on to question number 3. Which season do you think is hardest to get adjusted to?
Well, as a Trinidadian, the hardest one for me was winter. I kind of was anticipating, very anxious for this cold winter nights and, feel the cold because you've been accustomed to all the sun in Trinidad and all the, you want to wear nice jackets and stuff. You want to be out and, want to dress nice. You want to see snow. But for winter, it was really tough. All these different types of clothing and the complexities behind it in terms of driving slowly because I don't want to get in accidents. Safety is very important to us. And even when we are walking outdoors during those winter times, we don't want to slip on black ice. You have to be very cautious in terms of what you eat. Seasonal depression is always there. We have to keep our vitamin levels up. In winter, your commutes are longer. It pays a lot of stress on your body. Sometimes, as you get older, your joints, you wake up in the morning, it's really, really cold outside. It looks like night. It takes a whole lifestyle change to get accustomed to winter. And I don't think anyone truly gets accustomed to winter. So winter is very difficult for me to get accustomed to. But again, each season has its own pros and cons. So that's why winter is tough for me.
And something that no one really talks about, until you come here, especially leaving Trinidad or anywhere else in the Caribbean, is how winter affects your body, especially your skin, your hair. And I found very quickly that for our first winter, like, my skin just got so dry. Growing up in Trinidad, I never had dry skin. I had like oily skin, and then experiencing winter for the first time, it dried out my skin to the point where your skin starts to almost peel. You can even develop nosebleeds. So staying hydrated is really important in winter. So that's just something to keep in mind. It does affect you. Your body also, I would say, almost changes in a way because your body is almost like trying to like hibernate and trying to stay warm. But that's why it's so important to keep hydrated.
Okay, so for our next question, I have a question for Anthony. How do the seasons affect your daily life and traditions?
Christmas is the biggest holiday, I think, for Trinidadians, as well as Carnival. But coming here, and experiencing Christmas, it's in winter, it just has a different meaning now. It's all about cozy vibes and good food and family, but it's just different being in Trinidad, because obviously the weather is different in Trinidad. Every season is always different. So there are some winters it is really cold, but then there are some winters they're mild, and that's something that you realize that, seasons here are not fixed. The temperatures are not fixed. So one year you might get a really good summer, the weather's pretty good, but maybe the following year, there was one summer I remember it was just raining whole day and it wasn't much sun outside. So it's also trying to learn to adapt to the varying weather. In Trinidad, temperature is the same from morning, noon, and night. You plan an outfit to wear if you're going out, and that isn't changing for the entire day because the temperatures are the same. Now, before I leave home, I always need to check my phone to check the temperature, just to make sure I'm prepared, before I leave home if I'm wearing the correct type of clothing.
Right, so in terms of summer, we try to keep our schedules as we were on a normal basis, as we were living in Trinidad. We go to the gym a couple times a week, and we be outdoors, walks and stuff. Now, with winter, we do try to keep the same thing as well. You can't really be outdoors as you were in summer. So we try to maintain our activity, our body levels up. We don't want to hibernate too much during winter, but it really varies, and we have to be in touch with the weather, because we find ourselves like trying to keep that same habit of being active during those cold winter nights.
So even though Canada has 4 seasons, I've always found that summer and fall, which tends to be the best seasons and I think everyone's favorite seasons, I've always found that those 2 seasons in particular, they tend to be the shortest. And that's because after summer ends and fall ends, we're moving into the cold, something that not anyone really looks forward to. And that's why you find a lot more persons being outdoors in the summer. They're doing a lot more activities in the fall, especially with their kids, because they're trying to soak up every minute that we have of the sun and warmth, because Canada is cold mostly for the year. But one thing I found is, while some seasons sometimes may take a little bit longer or they may be a little bit harder to adapt to, I find that every season always brings new opportunities. It's new opportunities for change, and every season's always different, and it always gives us something different to look forward to. And that's part of embracing change and all the seasons, is being able to look forward to what each season brings. All right, so we're at the final question for today, and this question is for Surin. What is your favorite season?
Well, for me, I guess you guessed it, I'm in the colors, we already decorated. Fall is my favorite season because there's a lot of things to do in terms of wearing jackets and stuff. I like to wear jackets, I like to be fashionable, and it's cooler weather. It's more comfortable. It isn't as cold. You're not going into the minus. You're not going to get snow. You're not going to experience all the bad thing that snow brings. It isn't hot, so you could wear like jackets and feel comfortable. You're not sweating or feeling uncomfortable. You're not going to overheat. Fall brings Thanksgiving, which is a time we spend with your family. You could cook. You could have all these warm drinks, pumpkin spice season. This is what fall brings, and also fall brings Halloween. This is my favorite time, my favorite season, where we get to express ourselves in terms of creativity. If you're new to the channel, check out what we did the last couple of years, and it's really something that I really enjoy in terms of Halloween, dressing up on all the different takes on costumes and stuff. I like the kids they ring the doorbell in their cute costumes, and we give them treats and stuff. It's really, really nice. I really like Halloween, and more importantly, spend time with family, and that's why I like fall.
Yeah, and my favorite season, well, if you haven't guessed it already by our decor and our cozy comfort clothing for today's episode, my favorite season is fall. I say that proudly because being a Trini, I never thought that I would ever get to experience these changes, and I was rather surprised how quickly, I fell in love with the fall season. And for obvious reasons, it's the cozy vibes, it's the food, it's the holidays that you get to share with family, especially Thanksgiving. But I just find, it's cool weather, being a Trini, don't get me wrong, like we're very blessed to have a lot of sun, but I always wanted to experience that kind of cool temperature and with some sun still outside. So I look forward to the fall, and as you know, fall is the season of fashion, and I just feel like I'm in my element. I could wear all my nice boots and my jackets and my coats. And one thing I would say is, even though you may feel a little bit, depressed or sad that you may have to part ways with some of your Trini clothes, you don't have to change your traditions. You can still bring a bit of that with you when you're here. So like for me personally, like one thing I loved to do when I was in Trinidad, whether I was going out, I always used to like dress up, and I always used to wear good clothes, and that hasn't changed being a Trini here. I've just found different ways to be fashionable in the different seasons, and that's one thing I've noticed with Trinis living in Canada, is that we have still maintained our style. We still look good. I find like a lot of Canadians, they do wear a lot of black in the winter. I'm probably like the anomaly, because while I do have some black coats, I tend to wear my usual colors like I would throughout the year. So that just goes to show you, you don't need a change. You can still maintain and look good, but just keep in mind you're dressing for the season, but you can still be fashionable.
Well, thank you everyone. Thanks for making it to the end of episode 2 of Trinis Abroad. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and comment, and follow us on our social media platforms. And stay tuned for next week's episode where we discuss more of our experiences living here in Canada for the last 5 years. So thank you again, and we'll see you next time. Bye.